Stephen, always so good to see you. Happy Monday. A lot of stuff to unpack here, but I was really floored by this headline because I've never seen anything like this where we just openly say that, well, we have intelligence that Russia's going to attack itself as a false flag attack, blame Ukraine, use that as the pretext to invade. Is that unusual to have a headline like this? That's the first part of the question. And then the second question is this legitimate?
Yeah, well, Dana, first, I think we have to establish the parameters here. I mean, really, if we're going to talk about the overthrow of a sovereign state on Russia's border, I have to say, of all the things I'm really concerned about in the world, this is below my line. I just am not. This is below my line.
When did you own part of the Warriors? Oh.
I'm just learning how to deal with the world, courtesy of really wealthy part owners of sports franchises. And so I always thought that we were supposed to engage in the study of history and warfare and maybe some philosophy or whatever, but it turns out we can really set some really cool priorities about what matters in the world if we just find out what an overly privileged tech person thinks is below my line. So that's just what I'm going to live by this week.
I feel like you have more to say about him, and I'm going to open that can up here momentarily. We're going to come to that.
My gosh. But, we've had this swirl around Russia and Ukraine for a long time. And, of course, it wouldn't be in the situation it's in now if we hadn't had the managerial excellence of the Obama-Biden administration that allowed a big chunk of their sovereignty to be swallowed up by the evil bear. And so the evil bear continues to be an evil bear. And it turns out that they are cyber maniacs and do bad things in the world. You got basically the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, then all those Al-Qaeda folk that are out there doing bad stuff in the cyber world. And so, turning the lights out on the Ukrainian government, no big deal. It's below my line, especially for Jake Sullivan, who's clearly mastered every national security crisis of his 1 year in office, done a brilliant job.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all concerned about what happens with Ukraine. And is Russia trying to sort of set up a crisis? Would a conflict actually play well for Russia? The darker parts of my concerns are that it might, because America clearly isn't just weak. It's like under the table crying in retreat right now.
We couldn't even pass sanctions against Nord Stream 2 last week. And interestingly enough, they used that Jim Crow tactic, a filibuster, to stop those sanctions against Russia for that.
It was really offensive.
Yeah.
I felt the pain of that procedural tactic. And I don't know, it's just astonishing how far from common sense and reality we are. Obviously, a long time ago, we should have been helping the Ukrainians be in a position to do more to defend themselves. That shouldn't be the end all and be all of it, but we should also have been urging, giving maybe some incentives to, or even some pushing on Europeans to do more to help the Ukraine and improve deterrence against Russia and all of that. When it comes to the cybersecurity and the vulnerabilities, yeah, maybe we ought to give some thought to borders, whether they are real land borders or cyber borders, clean supply chains, all these things. But I digress. These are all things that we have churned over for the last many years. And it turns out when you don't solve any problems, they get worse.
Yeah, it is below my line.
With Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter. There was a great piece in New York Times. Sometimes broken clocks and all. Ukraine doesn't need the West to defend it. We need help preparing for war. I do think that Ukrainian government particularly recognizes that there's not going to be some great savior with NATO coming in, and they're really going to have to. I mean, this is really going to be something that's on their shoulders. Do you think that is it a merited argument to say that they should have at least been involved in the discussions between the British and American and Russian diplomats, or is it really just not something that they can be privy to, and it's really up to the United States to negotiate this? What is because that was lamented over by some of their government. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it obviously can't feel good to be a country that's in the crosshairs of a much more powerful neighbor, and the even more powerful neighbors that say they're part of the free world don't even want to include you in a conversation about your own well-being. So if the United States or Europeans don't want to include the leadership of the Ukraine in the conversation, then that sort of signals, well, then you're going to take this on yourselves. That doesn't make sense, I think, politically among our polities. I mean, certainly in the United States, there is not a deep thirst for a new conflict to deploy our soldiers for multiple years going forward. I have a hard time believing there's a similar appetite among European constituencies. So, I mean, if you're not going to include them in the meeting, you're sort of taking ownership of the solution, which just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, completely. I've got to get to what you talked about, what you hit on just a little bit earlier. One of the Warriors owners, Chamath, and I'm not going to pronounce his last name, who was giving an interview, and he just came right out and said, we don't care about the Uyghurs detention. We don't care. It's below my line. I just don't care. Kane played some of that. Play that again, that audio soundbite, because this was stunning, absolutely stunning.
Nobody cares about. Let's be honest. Nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs. Okay, you bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard.
Wait, you're saying you personally don't care?
I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth. Okay, of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
Clearly, it's below an NBA owner's line. I feel like what's his face, David Sterling. Someone said he should get a mulligan because of this. I've got to get your reaction to this because I'm floored and. I'm just floored. You clearly are. You're simmering here. So go off, sir.
No, it's just unbelievable. I do hope people will go watch this video. It's very brief, but the unsufferable, unbearable smugness of the way it's delivered is really like an 11 out of 10 on a normal scale. And just the eye deadpan looking at you like, you idiot. How could you possibly think that a genocide against Muslim minority in one of the world's major nations is even something that's really happening? And oh, by the way, it gets worse. It goes on to basically say, and the United States is no better than China, and the Chinese Communist Party isn't really communist, or it's not really a dictatorship. And I'm thinking, wow, there must be some real rarefied air in COVID lockdown Palo Alto or wherever this dude hangs out, because he clearly has not been to China's Northwest, has not checked out what's going on over there, but he pretty much just says the quiet part out loud. He doesn't care. He's just in it to be him. And I don't know, I guess it's proof positive that you can have a lot of money and you can apparently run some companies and still we're left way far back on the brain train. You cannot think for yourself. And if you don't really even care for humanity, then what are you going to do with this money you accumulated? I mean, really, you have all this. You're just going to eat it? If you're going to have these resources in abundance, in numbers that ordinary people can't even count, you should be caring and serving other people with it. So this guy is broken in any number of different ways. I hope people will watch him. If anyone deserves to be deplatformed, someone that says crap like this should get deplatformed, because we don't want to hear anything more from Mr. Smug.
Yeah, we're talking with Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter. Last question for you, Stephen. I was comparing the reaction to Olympics in Beijing 2022, which we've talked about, to Australia's treatment of Novak Djokovic, a guy who's had coronavirus. Everybody's freaking out. He's banned for 3 years. You can't do that. Tennis is being very selective and about protocol and where they have the opens and how they're being operated. There's such a disconnect here. It's stunning to me. There's such an inconsistency that I think communism is the worst virus, I think, on the planet. But yet, and they're having another apparently breakout of some fever hemorrhaging. Nobody knows what they're dealing with. It's probably from some bat cave, from some crazy doctor that we funded through Anthony Fauci. I mean, let's just be real. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that disparity there.
Well, I was never raised to really look to the world of tennis to guide what's happening in the world. But it turns out, I mean, we've got Peng Shuai, who was the lady who made the accusation in China against one of their top leaders involved in getting the Olympic bid to go to China. And she's disappeared. She's around. She's not around. And all of this focus on tennis, again, she seems to not be around. And then we've got the world leading player in tennis, And I hear that there's a great risk to every free republic in the world if a singles tennis player is going to come in and get on the court. I mean, there might be a risk to the ball boy or the side judge or something like that, but they can mask up. But the rest of the country, you got to lock them down because a tennis player is going to come in. I mean, all this does, it just makes it so that the nation that we came to love in Australia, thinking of them as kind of the good guy, bad guys we loved from prison rock territory to freedom-loving Crocodile Dundee. That's not a real knife. Now we've got people who, no, we can't let anyone into our country. We're going to lock down forever. It's just, it's sad. It's sad. But the most ironic thing out of it all is it's through the world of tennis that people are finally pulling the lenses back and can kind of see it clearly and go, oh my gosh. What is happening to us here?
Yeah, I used to think that the most dangerous thing in Australia, whether it was their, what is it, the world's most poisonous spider, what is it, that weird spider that they have, and then the gators and the dingoes that go after babies and everything else. I mean, everything in that country can kill you, but the government is apparently the deadliest. Pretty insane.
They're saving us from tennis, though.
Good
That's
heavens.
where they're going to go down in history.
Yeah. Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter. Always good to talk with you, my friend. Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.